Hello and welcome to Hosting HR with me, Leon Morley, founder of HR Recruitment Solutions. This week in the UK is Mental Health Awareness Week, and today we're going to be discussing mental health and work. We're currently live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and also onto YouTube. And across those platforms, you can get your questions, your comments over to us for our brilliant panel that we've got with us today. So also on those platforms, do drop us a like or subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel, or share it so that other people can obviously see the show as well. So shall we introduce our guests today? So we will start with Krishna. Please tell us a little bit and welcome yourself to our audience.
Hello everyone, good evening. So happy to be with you today. My name is Krishna Ruparelia. I've got a background in HR, 14 years experience working for large corporates, and I now specialize in well-being and resilience. So I'm super excited to be on this show tonight.
So thank you for joining us. And yeah, I know you've recently also published a book as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I have, and coincidentally, I have a copy here. So yes, my book is called From Question to Quest, Your Route to Transformation. In last 4 weeks, it's had a number of 5-star ratings on Amazon. And it's basically about a story really to tap into your own personal power. It was born out of the fact that when my father passed away, I was grief-stricken, and I was trying to find meaning in what had happened. And so there are some very powerful tools I found around tapping into my own power and developing the resilience. So yeah, I hope that you guys would take a read and let me know what you think.
Yeah, it's obviously I have my copy behind me as well, and yeah, I'm about 2/3 of the way through it, and certainly I found that I have to sometimes stop and reflect about some of the things in there and just think about how it kind of translates in terms of my life and what I'm doing and the things that I do. And so yeah, really yeah, thank you for coming on the show, and yeah, great to hear about the book, and great to see some great reviews early doors as well. So we'll stay with ladies. So Jane Piper, please do tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the Hosting HR audience.
Oh, thank you for inviting me along, Leon. It's a pleasure to be here on such an important topic as mental health in the workplace. So my name's Jane Piper, and I am an organisational psychologist and also an author of the book Focus in the Age of Distraction, which might let you know a little bit about the interest that I have, which is about the intersection between technology and well-being and productivity in the workplace. So my background, as you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from Down Under. And I am going to leave it as 2 truths and a lie so people can guess where that might be from. And currently living here in Switzerland. I run my own business now, but I spent 25 years working in various international HR roles around the world. And yeah, I very much look forward to answering the questions from your audience tonight and hearing more about their questions that they have around workplace wellbeing.
Brilliant. Thank you again for joining us. And yeah, I've took quite a lot from that book over the years. I've got a copy there, which I've had now for a number of years. And there's a lot of things in there that I still do in terms of, taking breaks at certain points and giving myself that time. So no, it's a very, very good book. And yeah, looking forward to seeing yeah, some of your wisdom being shared with us this evening. Which leaves me lastly to Paul McGregor. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the Hosting HR audience.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. And I feel really bad because I have a book, but I'm not holding it up or promoting it up. However, I'm glad to be here. And so I'm the founder of Everymind@work.com. Our aim at Everymind is to normalize mental health conversations in the workplace and take more of a strategic partnership approach to really look at how can we actually make real change in an organization. And we work with companies big and small. Our biggest one is the Co-op in the UK, and then we work with smaller SMEs as well. And there's a real purpose behind what we do. Personally, myself, I do a lot of talks and workshops and training for organizations around mental health, and I share my own personal story, my own personal experience of mental health. And sadly, the story that I lost my dad to suicide when I was 18, and it was a very sudden, out of the blue suicide, and I never expected to experience something like that in my life. So however cheesy this sounds, whenever I talk openly about my story, I try and just help one person, because I really believe that we need to start having more open conversations around mental health, because that can help a lot of other people as well. So yeah, excited to be here to dive into mental health in the workplace, and thank you, Leon, for having me on today.
No worries. Thank you for joining. And yeah, again, I've watched quite a lot of your YouTube stuff, and I think you recently did one on overwhelming. I thought that was really good. I watched it with my wife, and we ended up sharing it with some people as well, and friends and things of ours. So this is quite really good tips. So yeah, really pleased to have you here with us. And yeah, so shall we get to know each other in a slightly different way? And those that have watched Host in HR before will be very familiar with the sort of soft introduction that we do, which is a game that we call 2 Lies and 1 Truth. So quite simply in this, we will tell 3 facts about ourselves, 2 of which are lies and 1 is actually a truth. And then at the end of the show, we will reveal which one was the truth. So we had a few guesses from the audience in the last show. So feel free if you want to have a guess what people's truths might be. And we'll see whether you're right at the end of the show. So we'll go in the same order, if that's all right. So Krishna, if you'd like to tell us your 3 facts.
Okay, sure. So I did bungee jumping in New Zealand 20 years ago. I have a dog called Milo, and I live in London.
Okay, dog called. I'm writing them down so that I remember at the end. You'll probably retell us, but okay. Jane, what are your 3 facts about you?
That I have biked over 43 alpine passes in Switzerland, that I lived in the UK for 6 months, and that I'm a big rugby fan of the All Blacks.
Wow. Interesting. What was the first one again? Sorry, I got the
biked over 43 alpine passes in Switzerland.
Okay, they're good ones. That's one for me to think about, and for all of us to think about, actually. So, and then Paul.
So, I am amazing at DIY. So they're the best at DIY. I highlight my hair. And I am running 8 marathons in 8 days in October.
Oh, okay. 8 marathons in 8 days.
8 consecutive days, yeah.
Wow. Okay. If that's true, then that's absolutely amazing. Okay, so I'll tell you mine. So I am often wearing Batman slippers during the working day. On Sundays, I like to ride my Harley Davidson motorcycle, and I'm ambidextrous. I can use both of my hands quite easily. So yeah, those are my 3 facts about me. Stay tuned to the end of the show, and we'll obviously reveal which of those are indeed our actual truths. So let's talk about mental health and work. So the first question that I have is for you, Krishna, actually, is are we in a mental health crisis?
Well, Leon, let me just set the context here so that you can get a bit of an idea on the landscape that we've been operating in over the last 12 months, or even possibly a bit more. The COVID pandemic has disrupted the lives of billions of people globally. Factors such as social disconnect, the blurred boundaries that we've all been trying to grapple with between home and life commitments, the childcare strains, and the uncertainty about the future has resulted in an increase in mental health challenges by 30%, according to the CIPD report. The mental health charity Mind found that more than half of the adults and over 2/3 of young people said their mental health has got worse because of the pandemic. And half of the managers fear their staff are experiencing burnout. So it's very possible that mental health challenges are going to continue and possibly even get worse if, this topic is very close to my heart and many others as well. I know, Paul, I know your story as well. You shared that. So I think in answer to your question, are we in a crisis? I think there was an issue before the pandemic, just by the cost of stress in the workplace. But I think it's become a lot more pertinent, and it's under the microscope now because it's a necessity that we raise the profile of mental health, and it's not a luxury anymore to disregard it and just think it's nice to have.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I mean, if we, it's obviously something from the work perspective. If we think about employers, and I think we all sort of have this idea that employers should be doing something about it. I suppose, from more of an ethical perspective and just the how they treat their employees and things. But I suppose I'm quite interested in the business case side of things as well. And I'm wondering, Paul, perhaps if you might be able to explain a little bit more about almost the business side of things and why businesses should be doing more to help the mental health of their employees.
Yeah, of course. And this is always a difficult conversation for me, because it's a lot of the work that I do comes from the place that, we need to do this because, these are human beings and we need to try and help them with their mental health. However, when you put your business hat on, you can see it in a different way. And typically I'll have many conversations with HR, and a lot of them get it, they buy into it, but then they've got to go and sell it to the FD or the CEO, and let's be honest, that they might see it in a very different way. But there's a lot of research now, Deloitte papers that are out there that shows that for every £1 invested in mental health, companies saw a £5 return. There's lots of research and studies out there that have shown that there is a return on investment when it comes to mental health. And equally, when you think about it, if someone is thriving with their mental health, they're going to perform better. They're going to want to stay in that business. If they feel valued by that business, they want to stay there. They want to give their all to that business and to that job. Whereas if they aren't being supported, if they don't feel valued, then they're going to want to be looking for another alternative. So I think there's a lot of real business benefits from job retention, return on investment, higher productivity. There's a lot of conversations around presenteeism again, and how that is impacted by poor mental health. But I think as well, when you're looking at it, it's just the human thing to do, right? Every employee has mental health, so why are we still ignoring it? And just because no one's talking about mental health does not mean you haven't got a mental health problem. It means you have a silent culture and no one feels comfortable to talk about it. So, everyone has mental health in your business. So yeah, you need to do more about it for sure.
Interesting. Jane, I mean, from what we're hearing, do you think that businesses are, I mean, Paul's saying there that, we should be doing it. There's a business case for it as much as anything else. Mm-hmm. And he'd also talked about some of the challenges that sometimes happening at the leadership level and where they see it in the same sort of way. Do you think that businesses are aware of this at the moment? And do you think that largely businesses are doing enough in terms of protecting the mental health of their employees?
There's probably a wide range of businesses, some which are quite active and some which are not very active in this area. But I think there's a risk at the moment that there's a gap between the groups, because what the statistics are showing is that basically the people who are feeling the stress over the COVID are, exactly as Krishna was saying, it's the working parents. It's the people who have lost their jobs. It's the people who are living in accommodation which is too small so that you couldn't effectively be working from home. It's the people who are suffering financially, and leadership may not be in that situation. So they may be out of touch with that disconnect. They may be able to afford larger homes and that allow them the space. They can have their groceries delivered, so they've not got the stress of going to the grocery shop. They can afford to have alternative childcare. So there's a real risk at the moment that the leadership aren't understanding how exhausted their staff are feeling. And so while there's a general issue around mental health, the impact of COVID and generally the what's happened over COVID is everybody has started working harder. We've not seen productivity drop, which in one way we say that's a great thing, but what we have seen is levels of exhaustion and burnout and well-being, basically increased levels of anxiety, and people basically just working longer hours. And there's a risk in my mind that I see there's a gap between what senior managers are seeing and seeing that are not seeing that because they're not personally experiencing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm just going to bring up some of the comments that we've had so far in terms of this, because it certainly links a little bit to what you've been saying. To Naomi Asher, so Naomi is very involved with HR recruitment solutions. She's a non-executive director, but she said, agree with Paul. We should do it because it's helping people. It's the human thing to do, but also you're getting a return on investment. Not that should be the primary reason. We've had a comment here as well. So I think I'm pronounced as Niger Hornby. If I've said that wrong, I do apologise. So I'm currently doing a mental health first aid course. It's all HR people. There's no senior managers there. And the people of influence need to do these courses, which I suppose brings me on to thinking, whose responsibility is it to assess and promote mental health in the workplace? Is that managers? Is that HR? Is that L&D? What are your thoughts?
I'd say it's everyone's responsibility. You can't, it's like anything in organizations that you want to promote, you can't put, if you want change to happen in an organization, it can't sit within one area. So I thought it might be Nairi, but maybe I'm pronouncing her names wrong. But the mental health first aid is very good if you can get that breadth across, because there can be people all throughout the organisation who can champion mental health and be a person that people can seek out when there are challenges in mental health.
Yeah, it is Nairi as well. She's just messaged to say how it's pronounced. So apologies about that, Nairi. That's the benefit of a live show. But yeah, I mean, we've had a comment here as well, just on this point. Martin Roberts, so I know, has done some fantastic work in terms of within mental health with the Lloyds Banking Group, and we had a really good conversation actually about some of the stuff that's done there. And it obviously does seem to really come from everybody, but it's just interesting that it does seem to shoulder on HR's, like it's their responsibility and it's a HR thing. And because well-being generally is always kind of sat with HR, that this should also be part of it. This is just part of the well-being strategy. And it's not really for everybody else, but for HR to look at, which is something that I just don't think we agree. I'm wondering, Krishna, I know that you've had, obviously from an L&D perspective, and I know that you're perhaps not doing so much of that now, but obviously you've had many years working with lots of big corporates in the L&D space. Do you think that L&D, in terms of what's their role, I suppose, and in terms of helping mental health? And when you were very active in the L&D space, were you doing things around to support people's mental health and supporting with well-being, and are L&D teams generally doing that, do you see?
I think that L&D definitely has an instrumental role to play sitting within HR, and that kind of encompasses, having that voice on the board table, being that real strategic partner with the senior leadership team, and presenting the case like Paul proposed and has described earlier on around productivity, engagement, happier workforce, happier business. And it's really about educating line managers that well-being is part of the business strategies, is integrated into the business strategy. So it's not just a case of having yoga sessions, and then encouraging the employees to go for a walk and the job done. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So I think that in answer to your question, I do think that learning and development can drive the well-being agenda by influencing. So having that voice and being there as championing the need for this topic to be a high priority topic. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
Excellent. Paul, you talked earlier about the when people don't necessarily in the leadership see it as quite as important or a key priority for them. What sort of advice do you tend to give when you're talking to people about what they can do to get that sponsorship from the leader and how they can get some mental health higher on the kind of business agenda? What sort of advice do you give them, or what would you give them if somebody was asking you, how can I get this in front of our CEO and get them to invest in it?
Yeah, and I've just been sitting here observing because everyone's saying some really good points. But yeah, it kind of, as we've already kind of elaborated on, it does tend to fall on HR's shoulders. And there's this almost, staff morale needs boosting. What are we going to do about it? HR kind of approach. And it's difficult because they're juggling so much. And one of the reasons why we come up with more of the partnership approach that we offer is to save them time, to be able to be that expert of, our team of psychologists, to be able to support them with it. Because as Martin said, and I'm a big fan of Martin's as well, it is everyone's responsibility. But the sad reality that I've found, and I don't know if the panelists would agree on this, is it tends to only become an issue when an issue happens. And it's the reactive approach that we have taken with mental health for so long that led me into crisis, that led my dad into crisis, that leads many employees and employers into crisis, because we ignore it until an issue happens and then we do something about it. And it seems to kind of get escalated when, if I'm brutally honest, an employee potentially takes their own life or makes an attempt. And then it's like, we've been thinking about it, but now we need to do something about it. What can we do? And we then start to, throw money at it and hoping that we've got this strategy in place very quickly. So it's about people realizing that, as I've kind of alluded to, I hate talking about it, but the statistics that surround suicide are scary. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45. The biggest threat to my life as I sit here right now is me. It's myself. So actually, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, if we're looking at it in terms of the risk to our employees, we need to do more. We need to try and look at some proactive solutions. So I think when we're looking at how do we get that senior buy-in, I think it's data, it's education, it's getting them to see it in a different way potentially, and getting them to prioritize it. Because as Krishna said, this is no longer a nice to have. This needs to be something that you need to put in place pretty soon.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just. I was again. The conversation I had with Martin Roberts. He's just made a point here. Totally agree about the point about people working longer hours and look at resetting, boundaries. And I know Martin, it's been very. I don't think lucky is the right word, but has been able to kind of show really the impact and had that sort of space to really make a significant, difference within, in a large blue chip organization. So I suppose one of the things when I see that comment, and I don't know if this is something that I'm thinking about you, Jane, because of your sort of digital background, but how does this relate really when you're talking about remote workers, or we're talking about hybrid, or people that aren't? How does a company look after the welfare and the mental health of a remote worker who may not have lots of touch points with other people in the staff? Is there anything from your side that you could sort of comment on that?
I think the challenge there, as you say, is making sure that you increase the touch points. And that's a skill that perhaps managers have learnt to develop very quickly, or perhaps not over this last time, because it is different managing remote workers. The issue, as was raised in the comment by Martin, is that certainly over lockdown, people have been blurring their boundaries, their well-being's been impacted. But if all you do is see that two-dimensional picture on a screen and ask somebody, how are you? And all they really say is, fine, thank you. So the next question really needs to be, no, but how are you really? And actually inquiring and asking about that. And that is, I see the biggest, I think somebody's also put a comment in there, what tools can be made available for helping employees. And sometimes it's not that the employees need to help themselves. I mean, that is useful. But the biggest difference that it makes an impact on somebody's mental health is, and being able to speak about it, is the relationship that they have with their manager. So if they have a good relationship with their manager, then they can speak to their manager about it, then obviously do something to look at their work demands. So it's in that remote environment making so much more effort to be able to reach out and create those touch points. So I've run a number of seminars about mental health, and one of the things that we do is quite fun things, again, just asking people questions all the time. How are you? Fine. But, how do you feel today? What mood are you in? Draw me a picture on a sticky note and put it up to the screen. And some people say, oh, I feel so tired. I look like a salt sloth. I feel like my cat, all energetic and curious today. But it's a way of getting people to talk about how they're feeling, for example, but without saying, so how are you feeling, so that you get the stock standard, I'm fine, thank you very much, and going on for work.
Yeah, I think it's, from my perspective, I've remote worked now for quite a period of time, even before the pandemic, and I know that it's very different when you don't have those touch points necessarily with other people, and I definitely think from my own personal perspective, I found at times it quite difficult. So I think obviously having those touch points are really crucial for people to stay sort of connected. I want to go back to you mentioned about tools, and this was a point from Catalin. Hi, Catalin. She's I think watches most of our shows. She's a regular with us at Hosting HR. It's great that that you're with us today. So Catalin's asked, what types of tools can be made available to employees that can help them? And I don't know whether, Paul, this might fit quite nicely with your business, but this might be good for all of you, because I think you've all got some advice and that you could give alongside that question.
Yeah, sure. I'm terrible at answering this question, right? Because my company, we have an app that provides accessible support to employees. We drive a lot of anonymous data back to organizations. We do webinars, workshops, and we do the lot. But I think it's more about the why and less about the what. And in my experience, every business is different. So I think this question is very hard to answer, and it's about finding out what do your employees want, and remembering that mental health is very individual. There's no one size fits all. But when I talk about not the what and the why, for the years that I've been doing these talks in businesses, I've done stuff with Martin at Lloyd's and Warner Brothers and Deloitte and Ernst & Young, and then smaller organizations. And the one thing that they all kind of have in common is the ones that are doing really well have a strong why. So when I say to them, what are you doing for mental health? And they say, we have mental health first aiders. We have an employee assistance program. Last week, we had a mental health speaker come in. We have a fruit bowl in the kitchen. We do this. And then I say, why? And then they struggle to answer that. That's where they lack strategy. That's where they lack direction. And that's where they're guessing and almost just throwing mud at a wall and hoping that it sticks. And that's the strong reason why, again, we focus on more of a strategic approach of looking at the stigma in the organization, the management, and how well are they equipped, and the education that they've got, and the proactive strategies, and equally what has the business got in place in case someone gets into that crisis situation. So I think it's a long-winded answer for sure. I think it's about asking your employees, looking at your strategy. What is it that's going to benefit them the most? And I think one other thing that I shouldn't say as a business owner is a lot of these initiatives can be employee-led, and getting your employees to talk more openly about their experiences or come into the organization. And, I know Martin's done this at Lloyd's. If I'm really into meditation, can I host a small meditation class for some of my employees? And that doesn't cost a thing. Can I get champions in the business? Can we utilize some free training to educate our managers? So there's so much that you can do, but I think the first thing is don't look for the next tool, look for the reason why and the strategy behind what you're going to do next.
Excellent. Jane, Krishna, anything to add in terms of tools that you could add to Catalin's question?
I think after that, it would, I think I agree a lot with what Paul is saying, and I just go back to that point that the biggest difference to an individual contributors' mental health is the relationship with their manager, and that is broader than mental health. So that comes back to what Paul is saying. It's about that culture of leadership that they have within the organisation and being an empathetic leader, which goes beyond a fruit bowl or a yoga class and lunchtime and things like that.
I think you said to me once, Jane, if I remember rightly, you can go for a run and you can drink water and you can do some of the things that you might do, but if your boss is a nightmare, it's quite hard then every single day to kind of deal with that. So a lot of it is about actually for people understanding and how they operate and how they lead as a business and things.
I think the challenge is often we put a lot of personal responsibility on, because mental health is seen as a private issue, but because it's a private issue, it doesn't necessarily need to be a personal issue where you put all the responsibility onto the person. And exactly right, if you work in a toxic work environment, or you just are in the wrong job, the job just does not spin your wheels, you absolutely hate it for some reason, then getting up every day and going to work, it wouldn't matter how many yoga classes and fruit bowls and mental health talks that you have. If your boss still abuses you and sends you emails at Sunday evenings and expects you to work on them and things, it's not going to help. So we come back to that culture issue and recognizing that the organization plays a significant part in creating expectations for people, and helping them be clear about their roles and objectives, and all that good management and good leadership stuff, to put it into that category, makes a huge difference to people's general level of mental well-being. If we say those are a lot of hygiene factors, of course we've got other issues when it comes to mental health that may be beyond that and outside of that, but it's still a big role that the organisation can play in keeping a sort of a level of hygiene, shall we say, and mental well-being.
Interesting. Krishna, I know you do a lot of work with executive coaching and working with leaders and things like that. Is this something that, I'm guessing, given it's your passion and part of your purpose and things, that do you do quite a lot of support in terms with line managers about how to look after the welfare and the sort of well-being and mental health of their teams?
I think what Jane was, when she was describing what she was sharing, what was coming on in my mind was the notion of psychological safety. Like, I've been in roles where I've not really been able to share and express my vulnerability. And I think that if organizations, if line managers can create that safe working environment, that actually, I'm not okay today. And because behind the title of a leader is, again, a human being. And if we can all come to this collectively and say, I'm having a really difficult time. My children are not playing ball today, and I've got so many emails come my way. And I think, so in answer to your question, yes, I do work with a lot of line managers, giving them the tools to be able to have those conversations, because again, mental health is still got the stigma. Yes, we're making a little bit of progress, but I think we still have a long way to go. And it's okay for even a line manager. Quite often line managers are seen to be this perfect, I'm handling my 60-hour weeks and my home life, and and behind that is also a human being. So I think if we can create that level of safety, then we give permission to the employees to be genuine and be authentic, to have those courageous conversations. And that's when you can open up a discussion around how are people really feeling. So, I think that's the key thing. And then the culture starts to change because it's normalized, rather than it be like, oh my God, so-and-so is not coping right now.
Yeah, it's. I saw a post today on LinkedIn. I can't remember who posted it now, but they were saying about how many HR people are sort of talking about mental health and and their employees, but then sending them emails, on a Sunday evening, and then expecting them to respond to it, and then how come you've not responded? Need an answer to that. So interesting points on there. We've got a few sort of comments coming through. Martin Roberts again. So he's got a few points, which is great. I'm really hopeful we can get through them. So he said, I agree on educating line managers. I'd like to see line managers trained on more empathetic people skills, which is a little bit what we just talked about. In the past, we have focused on line managers' technical skills and knowledge, but the pandemic has shown that we need leaders who are empathetic. So yeah, absolutely in line with the points that we've raised. Naomi's so very concerning about the suicide statistics. I assume that was the Paul you mentioned. Was it just say under 45 for men? The greatest threat is suicide.
The biggest killer of men under 45, also biggest killer of young people, so next generation.
Wow, okay. And then we've had a comment here from Bev Pickeringshaw. So true, that's why it's really important. I'm assuming that's going back to the leadership side. And we've got Martin, again, so totally agree with Krishna. We should be free to bring our true selves to work and not put that suit of armor on when we step into work. So yeah, I will. I'll send
like a Brené Brown book.
Brené Brown, yeah.
Quote there, Martin.
Yeah, vulnerability is the new strength.
Yeah. So Martin has. I will drop a link actually to Martin so people can follow up, because he's got a really interesting story, and it's brown shoes is what kind of comes out from it. But yeah, really, really interesting, and certainly that. And he's also got a question for us. So the question is: given the world we now live in, are we in danger that mental health and well-being within organizations becomes too much self-serve approach as opposed to human interaction?
It's a tough one. That is a tough one. I think there's a danger of it. There's a really good book, Lost Connections, by Johan Hari, that talks a lot about the importance of community and that human connection, and how we've lost a lot of that. My granddad's generation weren't the greatest at talking openly about their mental health. However, they were very good at surrounding themselves with people and knowing everyone down his road and saying hello to everyone and having that kind of deeper connection with other people, which I feel like we lack because of technology, but equally we lack because of obviously the pandemic. So I think it's important that if we're looking at it from a business landscape, Martin, that companies need to encourage line managers to embed it into their check-ins and those water cooler moments that maybe we don't have if we're not working in an office, where I walk past and ask Leon how he is, and he tells me that he's okay, and I ask him again and he tells me that he's not doing well. Those conversations we're not having as much on Zoom. We're not forcing those conversations. So I think they need to be embedded into a lot of the check-ins, the team meetings, the conversations that we're having remotely as well. But very, very difficult question, and one that I haven't actually given much thought to, which is interesting.
I was thinking that, not going so much completely down the self-serve approach, but there definitely, I have clients that prefer the depression and the anxiety means that they feel more comfortable perhaps sending a chat message than they would having a face-to-face conversation when they are at that particular low point, because it takes so much energy, or it might play into their anxiety to actually have to go and talk to people. So having a range of technology versus non-technology options, I think, is a good one. But obviously you couldn't, because it would cater for the different needs of people, but obviously you couldn't just do one without the other. And it's something about having a range of different resources that people can choose what is the most appropriate one. But the huge challenge often is getting people to reach out and seek the support, whatever that support option would be, because people often are feeling at a stage very isolated and alone, and may not know where to turn, whether it's self-serve or whether it's somebody else face to face doing something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when we talked about, you said that, I think Paul, you said earlier on in the discussion, it just popped in my mind a little bit about how it's very individual. And I was thinking, obviously, most of our audience is likely to be HR professionals. So from their perspective, and I know there's no silver bullet for this, but if there's one sort of well-being initiative that you would say has the greatest impact that all companies should just have, and I know you'll say there's not only one, I know that's kind of roughly what the answer would be, but is there any, if I had to press each of you for one thing you think all businesses should do in order to protect and look after the mental health of their employees, what one thing would you say is the most crucial one? What one takeaway could people take from that?
I will piggyback off what Krishna said and encourage vulnerability, because for me, again, I don't necessarily know the science behind it. However, whenever I talk openly about my own experiences and I become vulnerable, it encourages other people to open up about their experiences and become vulnerable. And then it continues and continues and continues. And some of the best things that I've seen happen within organizations is a leader, a business leader, an employee, whoever it is, stand up and say, this is me, this is my story, and pull down those walls and be quite open and honest. This morning, I hosted a panel for our client called Waite, and it was 4 of their employees. One of them was Tim Waite, who is one of the family board members. Waite is about 4,000 employees, and all 4 of them had an honest account, an honest story of when they've had to be resilient, times where they've struggled personally, and it had such a profound impact on their employees. That's not taking anything away from me, but I'm an outsider coming into the business. You know, here's their employees actually sharing quite openly and honestly. So it's difficult to do. But yeah, I would encourage vulnerability. So encourage your employees to share, encourage others to share, whether you need someone external to come in to start that conversation, to get the conversations going, try there. But yeah, vulnerability for me is powerful in my experience.
Thanks, Paul. Jane, Krishna?
I think I'd go back to the leadership, that empathetic leadership would make a huge difference in an organization. And that's probably very similar to being vulnerable as well. It's saying that if you've got a leader who you can, who listens to you, then would make a huge difference to the mental well-being in our organizations.
And do you think, in terms of if you're looking at those leaders and assessing those leaders, do you think that's recruiting the right people? Do you think that's about training managers and leaders better within organizations?
I think there's a huge challenge in many of our knowledge-intensive industries that we promote people who are technically very expert in their area. So I've worked in pharmaceuticals and I've worked in engineering and management consulting. And these people are brilliant, but they've spent their life being experts on, xenodiodes or, atesimo or whatever the case may be. And they haven't spent their life thinking about the interpersonal skills that they now require in a team leadership role. And that is a skill that we have to help people to grow and learn into, because it's not that they're terrible people. It's just that it's not a part of their set of behaviors that they've been encouraged to do. Their whole training has been encouraged to develop a very critical thinking. And that's the complete opposite to what you need as a leader and as an empathetic leader. It's a bit like you have to be almost turn your critical side of your brain off.
Yeah, it's really, we talk about promoting, I mean, it happens a lot in my industry. Typically recruitment directors and those in the leadership are put there because of their performance levels, and it's very, very measurable in terms of what we do. If you're a top performer, and I've been there, I've been a top performer, and I've been promoted, and I've had to line manage, significant teams with not a lot of, sort of training or support. Just you're good at recruitment, you can manage a team now. It happens at lots and lots, and I know recruitment's not the only industry or ways that happens as well. Krishna, so again, same question to you in terms of, I know there's no silver bullet, but what would you say if there's one initiative that you think could have the greatest impact in terms of employee mental health? What would that be?
So I'm going to go down the employee responsibility, because we've not really spoken about that to a degree, you know, and I mean, it's not all about the organization. Yes, the organization has a duty of care, but the employee also then has to define their own boundaries in terms of, this is my self-care. You know, I can choose now not to answer that email at 11 o'clock in the evening. And I know whilst the statistics don't show that, because productivity hasn't dropped, but somewhere we've got to draw our own boundaries, because otherwise it just gets very, very stressful. So I would probably say an awareness of what is happening in ourselves when we're stressed and we're heightened with this cortisol. And, you know, if there's anything like, obviously, I think I'm gravitating towards the yoga, being a yoga teacher, and I'm not suggesting that that's a one size fits all, but just having an awareness of what's going on in our mind and our body is the first step, where employees can take that, you know, level of reflection and understand that actually, you know what, I'm feeling very cluttered in my mind. I'm going to take a half an hour out of work and I'm just going to have that break, and giving themselves the permission. So it's more of an employee ownership and not just down to the organization.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about that. I'm just going to go through some of the questions. So, so Martin, he said vulnerability training. Karen Griffiths said train mental health mentors and managers. Mental health services really let my colleagues down, which is not good to hear. We've had Nairi has said active listening. And then we've had Martin Roberts again saying Paul was fundamental in getting the conversation going when we brought him in 3 years ago. And certainly, you know, from what I've heard, you know, the stories from both of you, really, Paul and from Martin, that I've heard have been really sort of inspiring in terms of the differences that you guys have obviously made recently. So, but just going back to your point then, Krishna, we talked about the kind of personal responsibility, and I'd like to ask you all actually this question. So, any sort of key sort of takeaways or tips about how a person can take, you know, improve their own mental health and that sort of prevention that we've talked about, but from a personal perspective, not the business, not what HR can do or leaders can do. What key takeaways can people take in terms of their own well-being?
I'll start if you want. And thank you to Martin. Martin, I'll pay you after this.
It's very kind, isn't he?
But no, and yeah, no, just quickly as well, it was really funny how everyone shared very similar to the strategic approach that we take, and that approach is vulnerability, empowering employees, but equally training managers top down, encouraging them to have the tools to be able to manage their mental health. So I think our three answers combined, if you can take that away, that's a really good strategy to implement. Personally, again, I think Krishna made a really good point in terms of self-awareness. I think when I was struggling the most, I didn't have the self-awareness to know that I was struggling. And equally, I didn't have the self-awareness or the tools to be able to deal with how I was struggling. So I think it comes down to the fact that we aren't educated on mental health in particular. So we don't necessarily have that self-awareness to know whether we're struggling. And for me, it's about, I talk about it a lot in my talks, about having your own toolbox, and however cliche that sounds, but you know, the tools that I was given to deal with my dad's suicide was anger, ignore it, go out and get drunk at the weekends, overwork, you know, don't speak about it. And as I was trying to deal with those uneasy emotions, I was reaching into my toolbox and picking out those negative habits, and you kind of get into that whole cycle down and down and down. Whereas, you know, now my toolbox is of course not 100% positive. I still sometimes bury my head in a laptop. I still sometimes grind my teeth at night when I'm stressed, or I struggle to sleep, or I might have a drink at the weekend if I've had a stressful week. But it also involves journaling, therapy, meditation, going out for a long run or a long walk, and switching off, spending some time with my young kids and my wife. And, you know, I've now got some more healthier habits that when I have the self-awareness that I'm struggling, I have some tools that are very individual to me. But I think it's about finding out those tools for yourself. So yeah, there's definitely a lot that's helped me along the way. But if I can pinpoint one, it's therapy. I think, you know, that was the catalyst for me to start talking to one person about it, start to discover more about my own self and my dad. And, you know, I still go and see her today, 8 years later, right? So yeah, it's finding what works for you, but having your own tools in your own toolbox.
Thank you, Paul. Jane, it'd be good to get your take, and maybe even on the digital side of things, and in terms of what we want me to do.
I obviously couldn't miss an opportunity to say that, you know, that creating those boundaries, as Krishna was saying before, between work and life, and that means switching off the phone and the emails and taking time out. And if you've got time to take time out, then if you're able to, I would strongly suggest being out in the nature and doing some physical exercise while you're doing it, so that you know, you get those benefits to manage while it manages your physical well-being, it also has a huge impact on your mental well-being, as Krishna was saying, from also, you know, helping clear away the stress hormones. But everyone, as quite rightly said by Paul, has their own strategies and has their own techniques, as long as they're not self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, or you know, then it comes down to you. So that's why in an organization to say, you know, there is one right way to manage well-being is unhelpful. And often when I've worked with clients, it's actually finding something that they used to do. I mean, I even had one client say to me, I've paid for a very expensive coaching program to be told to find out that I should go back to jogging again. Like, you know, that sometimes it is the most obvious things that you have in your own toolkit that perhaps you've forgotten. Yeah.
I think for me on a personal level, I play a lot of football. A lot of people that watch this show regularly or know me know that it's a big passion of mine. I like Newcastle United and Kevin Keegan. Football's a big part for me. And when we have the situations where, certainly during the lockdown, where I couldn't play football, for me, it was that was a real big test. It's such a big part for my sort of happiness, and I get sort of a bit more. You know, I just know my wife's like, you need to get back to football. I think it's the social side as well as the physical side, and the sort of competitiveness of it. It's a huge thing for me. I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm getting older, and a lot of my teammates are much younger than I. I'm hopeful I can stay fit enough and good enough to keep playing. But yeah, it's a huge thing for me.
Don't they have a masters team or something like that?
No, there's a veterans league, which I'll qualify for in about 6 months or something like that. So I might be close to playing the veterans league, yes. But yeah. Krishna, I know, obviously, I don't know. Well, I can guess maybe partly what you might say, but from your side, yeah, what would be your sort of key takeaways for people to look after their own personal mental health?
Yeah, I think you're going to guess very rightly what I'm going to say. So for me personally, well, like Paul said, you know, you have to find what's in your toolbox. And, you know, one day you might do one thing and another day you might do another thing. And that's okay. And it's really about customizing that toolbox to suit you, your preference, what works. Sometimes it's experimenting. For me personally, like I had a lot of anxiety when I was at university. I was failing in exams. I had a lot of pressure from my family. And so I discovered yoga. And now, you know, when I teach yoga, when I practice it and I live and breathe it, it's only because I feel clear in my mind. You know, I'm clear in my mind. I'm a lot more energized. I can respond to situations and not react. So if I'm flooded with emails and the pressures of work, I'm not being so reactive. And it really works for me. And for me personally, I've completed a breathing course about 6 years ago. And that has now been endorsed by Harvard University, and millions of people are really, really benefiting. So I volunteer for the Art of Living organization. If any of the listeners out there want to look it up, Art of Living is our largest humanitarian organization, and they run these breathing programs that really bring a lot of resilience and well-being. So again, if it resonates, if you know, it may resonate it just calms the mind and provides that level of centeredness and clarity. And I think we all need a little bit of that. So that really works for me. I can definitely feel the difference when I haven't done my breathing practice in the morning. But like Paul and Jane said, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. For me, the football. Everybody's got different things that they look at. So we're close to wrapping up. We're coming up to our hour. So I've got sort of one last question, and it links quite nicely. Our next show for Hosting HR is around hybrid working and the future of work and the return to the office for many people. So the last question really is, and I'm intrigued about this because I don't know, I hear little bits, and I've spoke to HR leaders recently who told me bits about how people are going to go back to work and what sort of rules or not rules that they're putting, or how they sort of be organised but not organised at the same time and things like that. So quite interesting. But how are companies sort of preparing their employees that are returning back to the office mentally in terms of making sure that they're going to be ready? And because it's quite a big step, I think, for a lot of people having been out of the office for such a long time. What have you guys seen or heard in terms of that?
I've been talking to a number of different places, and then again seeing the whole spectrum of some which are just sort of saying, you know, everybody can come back when they are and are not doing a lot about it, and others which are really taking a strong stand on making sure the risks are lower through managing it safely. So I think we're seeing a broad spectrum of how organisations handle it. But what we will definitely see is, we're not going to see everybody going back to the office, and that's in the way that we were before. And that's going to have different challenges on our mental health, as we have some people in the office and it's very easy to bond and build trust, and some people who are working remotely, and you have them all mixed up in one team. That's going to create some interesting challenges, I believe, on where people feel as an outsider or an insider in the organisation or in the team.
Yeah, certainly. But when I spoke to a few people in terms of that, there's some support, and there's other organisations that just kind of. I mean, I saw the Goldman Sachs "everyone get back to the office" sort of rule. It seems like it's very different, and certainly in the discussion on the 9th of June. With the panelists that we've got lined up, I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and also not just about the return to the office, but really around the future of work and what work should look like, and how that should change potentially for people as well. So that pretty much concludes the questions. We've obviously got our 2 lies, 1 truths still left to do. So we'll kind of go round. So perhaps if we can do like a little bit of a reminder, and then we'll do the truth straight afterwards. So Krishna, you were first. Remind me of your 3. So one was bungee jumping or something. Perhaps you could go through them again.
Yeah, bungee jumping in New Zealand. I've got a dog called Milo, and I live in London.
What breeds your dog?
He's a Shih Tzu, and I hope that he wasn't too disruptive because he was barking. So I'm really sorry about that. But whatever I do, it seems like when we've got a really important meeting, that's when he barks. He's downstairs. But he's,
He's definitely got
people keep walking past.
That one.
There we go. I asked that one because I thought it would be a bit of a trick question for you, because you'd have to think it up on the spot. Turns out that was the truth then.
Yeah. And also my face lights up when I talk about my dog, because he's like my heartbeat. So I can't really lie about that.
So I think then next we had Jane. You were cycling over some alpines.
So yep, biked over 43 alpine passes. I've lived in the UK for 6 months, and I'm a huge rugby fan, especially of the All Blacks.
What do you think, Paul? I'm intrigued by your.
You've lived in the UK, or you live in the UK?
I lived in the UK for 6 months.
I would say the All Blacks one is the lie.
Krishna?
I would say the All Pines. The first one is the lie.
The first one? No, so it's 2 lies, 1 truth.
Two lies.
So just one, just one truth we're looking for here. So I'm going to go with
you lived in the UK for 6 months. I would say that's true.
And I'm going to join Paul and say it's the All Blacks.
Is the truth. No, you're wrong. The one that's true is that I biked over 43-hour time passes in Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
I got it all wrong.
I'm a brilliant liar. I must be a sociopath.
Yeah. I was trying to analyze your your facial expressions, thinking, oh, what is clearly got that wrong then.
So and then Paul, yours?
Mine was, I am amazing at DIY. I highlight my hair, and I'm running 8 marathons in 8 consecutive days.
Krishna, Jane?
I think the truth is you highlight your hair.
Krishna?
I would say that the truth is, that you highlight your hair.
I'm going to say, because I think it's the kind of thing that you do, and I hope it's true. And if it is, then I'm going to say bravo before. I think it's the 8 marathons in 8 days.
It is, that is the truth.
Oh my gosh!
Wow,
that is incredible.
And it's funny, right? Because we did this with our team meeting, and everyone said I highlight my hair. So I definitely need to consider the blondness in my hair, because everyone seems to think that I highlight it. This is all natural. This is all natural. But 8 marathons in 8 days. I was meant to do it last year. It was called off because of the pandemic. It's been moved to October. So the aim of it is start in Glasgow, 8 cities all the way down to where I live, and getting people involved in the runs as well. So raising money for children's mental health.
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is
please.
amazing.
When you
finish that, you can bike over some mountain passes.
Exactly.
Yes. Right? Straight afterwards.
Exactly. And then I can highlight my hair as well straight after.
Exactly. And then we wouldn't make a mistake on this, would we?
Paul, make sure you tell me when you get to the point of doing that. We will share some stuff with the hosting HR on the shows, and I'll do what I can. Obviously, I've got a fairly extensive network, so I can help you with getting some awareness and some donations and things. Then please do shout, because that's a real awesome effort. That
it is indeed.
So mine are a bit silly now in comparison following that. So mine were, if you recall, so it was, I'm often found working in Batman slippers. On Sunday, I most like to do is to ride my Harley Davidson motorbike. And then finally, I am indeed ambidextrous. So those are my 3 facts, one of which is true. What do you think?
Ambidextrous.
So Jane's ambidextrous.
I think you're wearing your, I would imagine you potentially wearing your slippers.
Okay, Paul.
I'm going to say slippers as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that he is. I can tell.
Well, it is actually a show and tell, and yes, it's Batman slippers. I do all my professional business in these slippers. It was a present from my son at Christmas, because my wife asked him what he'd like to get, and he said Batman slippers. So I wear them most days. But that wraps up our truths. Thank you all for joining and watching at this point. Thank you guys for all coming along. It's been really, really useful, helpful. I hope lots of people have taken some things away that will support them. This is recorded, so it will go on to YouTube, and I will make sure that there's lots of links for all the stuff that we discussed, so you can follow up if you want to look more into the books, whether it's the websites or whether it's YouTube channels. I'll make sure that all those links are there in case anybody wants to follow up. But thank you all for being on the panel, and thank you all for listening and watching at home.